Welcome to Self-Discovery Media Network, formerly known as Self-Discovery Radio. Each week we bring you illuminating shows from those making a difference in the lives of others. They've taken their own journey. They're here to share their skills, their wisdom to help you on yours. You can see more about us at selfdiscoverymedia.com, and please listen to our wonderful collection of shows. Our next show is...
The Wellness Journey podcast series presents Spice of Life, a seasoned woman's guide to renewing her essence. On this journey, you will find all of the flavors you thought you'd lost. It's there. You have it, especially while in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. On this show, experts in the field of wellness will give you the chance to be restored, re-energized, and renewed so that you can be successful along your wellness journey. Welcome to the Wellness Journey podcast series. It's always wonderful to get a chance to share with you some of the premier experts in the field of mind, body, spirit wellness, especially when it comes to wellness for women over 40 and all the people who love them. Today, we're going to be talking about, as we have been with this series, a seasoned woman's guide to renewing your essence, and I've told you before, the reason why I decided to come up with this series is that I think that sometimes along the way, as we're growing and maturing and just going through life's journey, we sometimes need to be renewed, re-energized, kind of restore our essence and who we are or who it is we desire to be. So I've asked various women in the field of mind, body, spirit, wellness to come and talk with us a little bit about different ways that we can renew ourselves or maybe even rediscover who we are, or maybe even find out that there's something completely different that we want to be, and that's where our essence is. So I'm hoping today that this interview will help you do just that. Today we have with us somebody who I truly admire. And one of the reasons why I admire Beverly Kyer is that she's always reinventing herself and getting better and better in terms of the things that she cares about and the things that she talks about when it comes to helping people deal with the whole idea of trauma. Now, some of you might think, well, what does trauma have to do with renewing your essence? But the reality is that trauma is something that we all deal with, whether we realize it or not. There's always a time where we run into something that's unexpected, that kind of stops us in the track, whether it's a loss of a loved one, a loss of a job, or something else even more traumatic happening in the course of our lives. And today we have with us Beverly Kyer, who's going to be talking with us about what trauma means and her work in the field and some tips on how you can deal with the idea of trauma. Beverly, thank you so much for being with us on the Wellness Journey podcast series. It's wonderful to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Linus. I'm so excited to be back with you talking and to contribute to this wonderful, wonderful program that you have.
Well, thank you. Tell us a little bit about you and how you came to be so passionate about helping people deal with the idea of trauma.
Well, I began my career as an elementary school teacher, but that led me for various reasons to go back to social work school and to be able to help people who were really struggling with all kinds of life traumas and crisis, which I faced in the public school arena. My first assignments were with children with cancer and leukemia, and therefore helping those parents when they got that awful diagnosis through a horrific treatment protocol with their children, and often I was helping them bury their children. I transitioned from that for various reasons because around the fourth or fifth year it was pointed out to me that I was behaving in a way that other people noticed. So the assignment itself, the losses, the challenges, the pain and the suffering that I helped these people navigate through was taking a toll that I did not see. I did not see because I felt so purpose, so missioned, so passionate about the work that I couldn't see what it was doing for me. But like I said, someone else noticed. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was just transitioning because I got an invitation to come work with veterans returning from Vietnam with suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. That involved extensive training on me to understand the traumatic experiences, not only of the atrocities of war, but what was happening to them when they got back home. What were their manifested behaviors? And then again, that pointed me to look at the families, look at the parents, look at the spouses, the partners, and the children of veterans, whether they were male or female veterans. And I saw secondary trauma in that. I saw vicarious trauma. And to some extent, some of them had post-traumatic stress disorder because they were in anticipation constantly of the veteran just kind of being explosive or being numb and depressed. I did that for about 16 years. And again, it was pointed out to me by people who were close to me and observant that this too is beginning to take a toll on you, and that there were changes in my personality, my character, my conduct, my mood, my emotions, even my cognitive thinking sometimes, and definitely it impacted my interpersonal relationships. I became very impatient with my own children who had a healthier life. I became impatient with my husband because I'm looking at other people suffering. But understand that this is some of the things that being in constant traumatic experiences, how be there somebody else's crisis or chaos, causes trauma in us.
That's
and
true.
In most cases, we don't even see it coming because we, if you're like myself, and many of us are, we're so focused on helping.
Mm-hmm.
We're so focused on their struggle, and we're so passionate to impact that in a positive way that it's easy for us to adapt to any shifts or changes, certainly not to notice the toll it's taking on us. Anyway, after about 16 years, I was invited to come and work in child welfare.
Mm-hmm.
And in child welfare, I was working with children who were severely abused and neglected, sometimes to the most extreme ways. And I did this too with great passion. I worked with their families, birth families, foster families, kinship families, their communities. I worked with law enforcement and mental health. And I want to say again, in spite of all the passion, all the purpose and sense of mission, and my ignoring what was happening to me, this time I suffered heart failure. I just collapsed. Not once, but twice.
Mm.
And I got to point this out too, because the second thing, how heart failure happened, because I didn't learn anything from the first. I was anxious to get back on my feet and get back in helping them. I want to say to you that I put their needs ahead of what was happening in my own physicality. Mm-hmm. So all in all, when I had that second heart failure, that was such a wake-up call. It set me down, 3 months of intensive rehab. I couldn't really be preoccupied in other people. I thought that was it. But it made me research. It made me really, really think in retrospect, how did something like that happen to me? I'm doing service. I said, this is my own personal thing. I'm doing God's work. I'm supposed to be fine. But the research led me to books, led me to studies, and I realized that over the course of now 29 years, and it doesn't have to take that long for it to take a hold of you, so don't get that mixed up. But I realized over 29 years that I had lost so many colleagues in various ways. They kind of like walked off, they got depressed, alcoholism, family breakdown, all manner of illnesses. And I even lost some colleagues to suicide because they, like myself, did not consider the impact of working in intense, stressful situations. And some of them, like myself, were also family caregivers. I not only was taking care of other people, I have a son that had multiple surgeries. I had a foster daughter who became my adopted daughter, but she came with significant problems, having been born drug exposed to a drug addict mother and father. And my mother got sick when we were children, and to some light extent, I was helping my father take care of her. I think what I'm really saying, Lennis, is that we women could take on so much for the needs of others, and we do it out of love, and that could kind of delude us to thinking that we're okay.
Right.
And your passion and your love for one another and others, your family members, your spouses, your children, your work, does not make us immune to the impacts that it would have on our bodies, minds, and spirits. That was my greatest learning, but almost after dying. And I went into this work because when I got up out of that chair and I said, Lord, what am I supposed to do? It was like, go back to the field, go back to the communities, wherever you could get invite, and let people know that what really happened to me did not have to happen at all if I had ever understood that I was supposed to take care of me concurrent for taking care of others.
You know, that's such a powerful message, because the reality is, you always hear the story about when you're on an airplane and it's going down and the oxygen mask comes on, they tell you to put the oxygen mask first on yourself and then on others. So we intrinsically know this as women, as people, but we don't always act on that, because there's that other subconscious messaging that's going on in our mind about, you're being selfish, you're not thinking about others, you're a giver, you're a nurturer, all these other things. And we have a tendency to kind of give away bits and pieces of ourselves without feeding back into ourselves. And we become what I call part of the walking wounded, Yeah, we're going from place to place. We're raising our families. We're going, doing our jobs. We're working in our communities. We're going to church. We're being the best friend. We're caring for our parents. We're caring for our grandchildren. All these different roles that we're playing. But somewhere along the line, we've lost, as we're talking about today, we've lost our essence. We go back to the back burner where we've been putting ourselves for so many years, and we reach back there and can't find ourselves.
There's nothing there.
There's nothing there.
Or you forgot that it was there, if it ever was there in the first place.
Well, that's another thing. So given that, what are some of the warning signs we need to be looking at, what we need to be aware of, so that we don't get to that point where we can't even find ourselves? What kinds of things should alert us of that?
There are a host of warning signs, and I will kind of subdivide them into 6 categories. Working under stress, taking care of others, being a servant of the needs of others, and whatever role you do, always impacts us cognitively, how we think. It always impacts us behaviorally. It will shift how you behave, how you operate in situations. Sometimes we operate in sheer desperation, overdrive, or underdrive. It will impact our interpersonal relationships, how we see each other, how we feel we're being treated, how desperate we are to help others, and it would cause anger, maybe sometimes where anger is not really warranted, disillusionment, separation, or just an overtry to never fail people. I come from a pastoral family, and for me to consider myself in somebody else's need, I saw the modeling of my grandfathers, my grandmothers, my mothers, and my fathers, always showing up for people, and so I felt a great deal of guilt to say no when I had time. It impacts us spiritually. Oh my goodness. Some of the things we see, some of the things we experience can make you kind of question what we know spiritually and to disregard our own spirituality. It impacts us definitely physically. There's a host of illnesses, a host of serious, significant, near-fatal, and fatal illnesses that are all directly related to unmanaged stress in our lives. So socially and emotionally, it could just make us labile, crying over spilt milk, or angry over things, and depressed over things. So those areas, I think I said them all: cognition, behavior, emotion, interpersonal, spiritual, and physical are the impacts. And underneath those are a host of symptoms, warning signs, and indicators of what could be going on in people's doubting self, doubting life, questioning God, not losing trust, losing faith, being so disappointed in people, being disappointed in ourselves that we can't do everything that we feel we want to do for everyone, pushing ourselves, ignoring ourselves, neglecting ourselves, just being overcompensating. There's an interesting thing about family caregivers when I get to survey them. Somehow, in many cases, you'll find out that the person who's taking care of mom and dad now is a role reversal. They have been somehow the identified ones in the family to do everything. Other siblings are not necessarily contributing or sharing the responsibility, but I think when I question people like myself, it's a precedent we have set for ourselves. We kind of set ourselves up to be the one that does everything, and you get to a point you don't even ask for help to do it.
Right.
And you may ask, and then it's not coming, so you just do everything.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is a classic syndrome for a lot of women in general, especially those who might be the oldest in their family or the only girl in their family. And I'll tell you a story about a friend of mine that this just happened to. Her husband has been critically ill for 10 years, and she has been the sole care provider those whole 10 years.
Wow.
Just recently retired about 3 years ago. She has a daughter who doesn't live too far, who doesn't really offer a lot of assistance. The husband has siblings who live in other states, and they haven't offered assistance. And she was down to her wits' end, in tears, because he's not getting better. He's getting worse. He's getting heavier because he's sedentary. He has to go to dialysis almost every single day. And she has to help lift him. And he's close to 300 pounds. And
Wow.
if she's 115 pounds and she's 100 years old, I know she's not 100. She's probably much less than that. And so she's having to figure out how to maneuver and everything else. And one weekend, her nephew came to visit, having no idea what she was going through because she hadn't said anything. He called his mother and mentioned it to her. Now, this lady's on my prayer line that I go to every morning. And right after, during prayer line, she kept getting calls, you know, and she said, I'll call them back because we're in prayer. And so I called her right after prayer, and she picked up the phone and she's boohooing. And I could tell she was getting ready to break into tears while we were on the prayer line. So I figured that this was what it was. And so I said, what's going on? And she said, Lennis, I just can't believe it. I can't believe it. My nephew. And I said, what happened? Did he make it home safely? Because he lives on the East Coast and she's on the West Coast. She said, yes. And she's still crying. She can't get it out. And she said, my husband's sisters called. And I said, oh, are they okay? And she said, yes. She says, Lennis, they're coming out to help me. And I said, Nidra, that's wonderful. She says, Lennis, they kept asking me, why didn't I let them know that I needed the help? My nephew came, he saw what it was, he called his sister, and, you know, and they didn't know because she didn't ask for help. They thought that everything was okay. And that happens to so many of my clients when it comes to just their overall wellness and things. They don't ask for help. They just kind of accept it as their plight. And that this is just the way life is. And I'm here to tell you, based upon that story and the other women that I've worked with, that if you are in a point where you're ready to break down in tears, you know you could be doing better, but you've kind of accepted that this is just your plight. I'm telling you right now, that is a lie from the pits of hell.
Yes, it is.
That's one of the lies we tell ourselves. There's always something else that you can do to help yourselves. Why is it that we, especially as women, have a problem when it comes to reaching out and asking for help?
You know, asking for help, people ask me, I conference and I do workshops and trainings on a national level. Every agency I go into, and it's a national thing. It's an international thing, and it's especially women. There's a wiring in us, those of us who have the compassion, the empathy, and the caring to help others. That's not common in everyone. There's some of us are designed that way. And I said the first line of defense for all of us is to ask for help, but the truth of the matter is helpers, by and large, do not ask for help for all the same reasons you said and more. We don't think we should. We don't think we, see, I think many of us would feel that for me to ask you for help, I'm burdening you. I'm putting something on you. Did I tell you, I think I told you about the time I was having a cardiac hiccup. I was in trouble. I knew I couldn't breathe. I felt the tightness and I didn't want to lay down, but I was standing at my window because I live in a court and I could see my neighbors, and I was trying to think of who I should call and wake up because it was almost midnight to drive me to the hospital. I stood there and I stood there and I stood there and I stared at all those windows and ultimately decided to drive myself to the hospital in heart failure because I didn't want to wake up and burden people. And you know, we could do a whole workshop on that, the importance of asking. And where does that come from in our earlier orientation in life that we think we're not supposed to?
Well, I know that part of that is hidden in the whole idea of our own availability to ourselves when it comes to loving ourselves. And then when it comes to loving ourselves enough to care for ourselves, there almost seems like this guilt thing. I know I have it that I do, where I take the time, like for instance, okay, here's a good example. This morning, even though I know I had a huge calendar, I said, you know, I've got to take some time for a walk because I know if I don't do it right now, it won't happen. Before I know it, it'll be the end of the week. And I would not have been doing the things that I tell everybody else to do. And I really try to live by the things that I talk about. So I took the time for me to walk to my nearest Starbucks, which was about a good mile and a half away, and then to walk through the mile, which is another maybe half a mile, to pick up a few niceties for me for the week because I knew I wasn't going to be getting out again. Then most of my other workout would be yoga at home and stuff like that. And I got back here at around 15 minutes before it was time for me to send you the link for the show. But I knew I needed to take that time for myself. And I almost didn't do it because I didn't want to be late, for our interview. I felt kind of guilty because, I knew I needed to cook breakfast for my husband, put a load of clothes in, do this, do that. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to be able to do any of those things to the best of my ability if I don't take some time for myself. And once I, looked at it from that way, the importance of me doing this for myself so I could do all the other things that I needed to do in a way that's joyful, not resentful, that's not rushed, that's energized and not worn out because I've been inside all day. That hour and a half, 2 hours that I spent just with me doing what I wanted to do it is going to make such a huge difference. And
for the rest of the day.
For the rest of the day. Girl, it'll carry me throughout the week because I feel like I beat out that monkey mind that was telling me, oh, you shouldn't do this. It's taking much time yourself, blah, blah, blah. I beat it. I didn't listen to that voice. And I feel that is so huge, just learning not to listen to that voice. Now, you have a book called Blueprint for Self-Care. I want to talk about that real quick. I love that title. What is that book about? And why do you think it's important for people to have it?
Well, this is just a little tiny book. It's like a little handbook and manual built at the right size for you to stick in your bag. Sometimes people think that it takes so much time, it takes money to do self. And what I wanted to just give them the simple, basic, day-to-day things that you could do, weekend things that you could do without requiring a lot of time and or money. Is this shifts. And what I really think that too many of us model our lifestyles the way our neighbors do, the way other people do, and not counting into the fact that the structure of their life may be totally different. They may be actually 9-to-5ers. They got the mornings and they got the evenings and there's nothing else to do. But we have such an overabundance of things to do ourselves. Sometimes we're taking care of 2 households when you're taking care of mama and daddy. And or you got the sick person at home, child or a spouse or partner, after you come home from work. So this is just a basic little handbook with suggestions and recommendations titled Blueprint for Self-Care.
I love that.
Creating time and space and peaceful healing sanctuary for those who are caregivers and in helping professions.
And, I would say that even if you're not a caregiver, a book like that gives you at least the impetus and the ideas to begin to start thinking about yourself, because it is a lot of unlearning that you have to do, unprogramming or reprogramming that you need to do in order to put yourself on that front burner without taking yourself through guilt and recrimination and without putting it off. I mean, because there was a time where I just would not have done that because of all the list of reasons why I couldn't. And maybe only one list of reasons why I should was why I should, because I'll feel better. But there's a whole other long list that seems more important. But I am learning, and I have learned that if I don't take that time for myself to take better care of me, then inevitably I will get burned out and I won't be doing well.
And I hope more people get to think like you, because I'm still, Linus, running into too many people who won't do that. They kind of still self-sacrifice. They could think of more justifications that I'll feel better if I just get this stuff done.
Right, exactly.
I just push.
Right, this pushing. And then, you know what? You get the thing done, but then you're just too worn out to enjoy the fruits of your labor. That's the other thing that happens a lot of times. We, spend all this time doing for others, and finally they're better and we're sick. I have another story, and this is from a male's perspective. His wife was very, very sick, and he took excellent care of her. She almost died twice. He literally wheeled her back to life, and she's doing great. He literally did everything that was necessary except for one thing. He didn't take good care of himself. And one morning, she gets up to go fix breakfast, and he's sitting in his chair. He's dead.
Lord have mercy.
She's fine and alive, and he's dead. And he was not sick, at least that he knew of, but he was worn out. He was in his late 60s. He wasn't taking care of himself. He wasn't sleeping enough. His whole life was about getting her well because he almost lost her. But somewhere along the line, he didn't take the kind of good care of himself, and he was the one who ended up dead. We were shocked because he was always in such great shape, always in good health, always up and everything else, but he had a heart attack. His heart just gave out. So
And
that's
learn from that, everybody who's listening
cautionary
to
tale.
this, because unfortunately, that's incredibly, incredibly common. My own father died way too early because he took care of my mother and her sporadic illnesses. Therefore, he raised his 3 little girls basically by himself. And he worked, and he had a business. And he did, you know, I got him when he retired at 65. I bought him wonderful fishing poles. He died before he even took the rappers.
Girl, I'm telling you now. And that brings me to something else that I think is so important with your other book that you've written.
Yes.
It's wonderful. There's Surviving Compassion Fatigue. I mean,
Yes.
here's a man that I know personally. He's my sister's godfather who didn't survive his caring for another person. And I would imagine he might have had compassion fatigue as well.
That's an overall, over umbrella for caring for others. It's simply the cost of caring without regarding what it's doing for you. And again, I want to say, loving people does not make us immune to the struggle, the chemical changes in our body when we do this kind of work. I studied and understood the neuro-physiological impact of caring for others, being challenged by their needs, meeting their needs. It's not to stop doing it, but to figure that you're supposed to take care of you for the same thing. This book is written for those who are helping others. It's help for those who are helping others. It led me to a mantra. It came from my personal experiences, and it came from my discussions with other people who were wiser than me. You were one of those people at some point too. You just don't remember.
No, you have to tell me which one. How can I said something that was wise for you?
Yes, I went to a retreat with you years ago.
Yes.
That's it. And you were talking to us, and I was listening to you. But my mantra that developed subsequent to that and over the years was this, and feel free to copy this. I say to myself all the time, in fact, it's a sign on my wall in my face all the time that says, I will not sacrifice myself to help others. I will instead increase myself to help others. That means I'm really reminding myself to put back, to re-energize, to restore, to recharge me all the time. Therefore, if I follow that, what I'm really doing is serving, caregiving others out of overflow, as opposed to the last vestiges of my energy when I'm just pushing to take care of them and to somehow manage through my life. So don't do it don't sacrifice. Increase you.
I love that.
Serve from overflow. And not only are we serving them at a better capacity, a higher quality capacity with more effectiveness, but we feel good while we're doing it.
Yes. Now
not about the caregiving, but feel good within our own physicality.
Right.
Our bodies are like saying, yes.
Yes. And that's really a gift to be able to arrive to that point, because so many times caregivers are exhausted, physically, emotionally exhausted. And I know it's hard for some people to imagine, how can I possibly feel good when I'm, changing my dad? Or how can I possibly feel good when I'm constantly going to doctor's appointments, with my loved one, whatever. But
or the pharmacy, picking up stuff.
Or cleaning up. But there is a way to have joy, even in your current circumstances. And I believe that beginning of that joy is learning to love yourself enough to take care of yourself and to do those things that bring you a sense of joy, so that can carry you to the next time you get to do something like that again. Now, with your book, what are some of the things that you talk about when it comes to compassion fatigue? What kind of tips do you give?
Well, first of all, in that book, I let people really understand what's happening in their body, in the neuroscience, what's happening in your brain, what's happening in your body, what is the chemistry doing to the various systems in your body. I think it's not enough to say, motivate people about doing self-care. I want them to understand the damage that's happening, the detriment when you don't do self-care. So I give them the science. Then I give them an extensive list of indicators and warning signs. And it's extensive. It's both from your personal impacts, the cognition, the behavior, the interpersonal, the spiritual, the physical, the emotional. And then also the professional impacts, how that's manifesting in the workplace or your service place. Extensive lists. And I describe how some of these things look and how some of these things show up. I explain to people in the course of that, because we are who we are, helpers who do not ask for help, the importance of us having accountability partners. Surrounding ourselves with people who are going to nurture our self-care, push us, notice us when we're doing too much. Have I not called you and said to you sometime, you know, you're looking a little worn, sis, you need to back it up, you need to dial it back. We need people. Let me say this, I need my people, my therapeutic community, to save me from myself, because I know me. Mm-hmm. If somebody gets in trouble, somebody's in struggle, my focus is going to help them in spite of what else is on my plate. So I need some people that surround me, and I really pick them very, very carefully to say, oh, no, you don't. No, you don't. You're going to take a break, or you're going to do this, and you're going to get to this. That's important, to have those accountability partners. Most of us are not going to change from being service-minded, helping people.
Mm-hmm. That's right, because we're so used to doing that.
We're so wired. It's in our orientation, and it's the way we do life. And it's hard to change the way you've done life. So that's an important piece to do, the accountability partners. And then I have the other suggestions and recommendations on how to do self-care. How to really, really create space and time for yourself. Time, I think you just read in my last post, time does not come to us. We have to go after that and create. Some of us are morning people, some of us are afternoon people, some of us are evening people, or night people, whatever that is. But that's where you carve out your space for yourself. And then you're very, very tenacious to hold on to that. Like nothing.
Absolutely, like nothing in the way of that.
Yeah, that's the second coming. Nothing gets in the place for that.
Yeah, because I do my
again,
time.
You may need people to remind you not to shift it.
Right, exactly. And my time is in the morning. And when I don't do my morning time, I can feel a difference in my day.
This ain't going to happen.
Right. Now, I have learned, though, that within my morning time, I was very, very strict. I had, prayer time, Bible study, meditation, blah, blah. But I've learned now to listen to my body and to what's going on with me in terms of what I need to do for that morning time. Maybe I need to switch it up a little bit and make sure other needs are addressed, because circumstances and situations change and they impact you differently. So therefore, maybe you might need something else. One of the things that I've added, or I do from time to time in my morning time and different times throughout the day, I picked up adult coloring. I color. I color. Whenever I'm feeling like I can't quite pull it together, or feeling a little anxious, or feeling like I need to re-energize my mind, I start coloring. And my friends laugh at me about that, but that is one of the things that I've added to my morning time that I didn't have. I didn't even think about that 10 years ago. But on my 60th birthday, I was doing one of my walks, and I'm telling you, that voice in my head, the Holy Spirit said, go to the adult bookstore, the bookstore, not adult bookstore, go to the bookstore. So I went to the bookstore, it was a Barnes & Noble, and said, go to the adult coloring section. I said, the adult coloring section? Why would I go there? So I went, and there was this book with gel pens, and so I got it. Well, fast forward almost 2 years later, I have colored hundreds of these little small cards. Here's an example of one on here. They're this size. Okay, and I ordered them from Amazon. I must have about 300 gel pens now. And I just color these in different colors and things, and I give them away to people as blessings or whatever. They have scripture or affirmations on it or whatever. I can't tell you how much joy I give myself by discovering that I have this little gift for coloring. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but
it is a big deal.
It is for me.
And I'm going to tell you the science behind that.
Okay.
Most of us operate in the left brain hemisphere. Logic, reason, math, operation, structure, oral expressive language. Really, really important. Really, really important. And I think over the years, since I went to school in the early 50s, I just told you my age. Which
you would never believe your age because you look fabulous.
I'm 70 years old.
Oh my God.
I can say that with a smile because I made all these changes in my life. But left brain, the school stopped teaching, providing the kind of arts and crafts and things like that developed the right brain. I studied 6 instruments. I was in orchestra. I designed stuff in addition to my academics. Without the developing or reconnecting with the right brain, that's a total different chemistry. Appreciation for color, for music, for art, for form, for imagination and intuition. We get away from that. And when we're just stuck in left brain, which I say is important, it kind of leaves us in a struggle state, trying to understand and make sense out of what doesn't make sense, how to see what's logical when things are not being logical or things are unfair. it kicks us into a desperation mode in how we work and how we serve, also causes a level of neurosis. If it is void of the development of the right brain chemistry, which is really like your endorphins and your dopamines. It's, people like to silly call it your happy cells. But the chemistry is different. It overrides. It gives us a sense of great possibilities when things seem impossible. It allows us to think outside of the box. It allows us to hit the wall and say, okay, what's the next best thing? See, it lifts our spirit. It lifts our spirit. So getting into art, I have galore, a bunch of those little adult coloring books. I take them all over the place. I play Sudoku. I just stop work in the middle of the day and do pixelated puzzle. I go to bed and I play some puzzle. I do something to just get that right chemistry flowing in my body. Having fun and having laughter.
Oh, yes.
I pick my people on that. I surround myself with silly people, I call them. This is spontaneous things. But we work in dark. I work in darkness because I'm working with people who are victimized, traumatized. I'm post-disaster is my work. And I need that other part of the brain lifted and permeating my system so that there's joy and laughter. If, as people, and we could appreciate what you and I have both said, that as helpers, we don't ask for help. We're great in serving and taking care of others. If we could just understand that what that would ultimately do for us, and we're already there, is many of us are simply existing in the day-to-day responsibilities of our life and existing to help the needs of others. That is not life. And do not confuse that with having a life. A life is something you create. And that is with the surrounding yourself and engaging yourself with joy and creativity and beauty. That's going to be so imperative because understand that that's just not a motivational notion. There's a chemistry that permeates your brain and your body, and it changes and shifts your life, your joy, your peace, your calm, the way you think, the way you behave, the way you interact with others, if you get that in your life. A dear friend of mine gave me 2 classifications for friends some years ago, and I embraced it, and that's why I got a smile on my face. She says, I have my orchestra people, and I have my balcony people. I love them all very, very dearly. But as you could imagine, the balcony people that are in the distance a little bit, I make an appointment to see them when I am there and available to help and support them. They need me. They need me. The orchestra people, which are the people who are closest to me more on a regular basis, are the people who are spontaneous and they bring joy and laughter and silliness to my life. That's my medicine.
And that is so important. And you're right. Especially as we age, I think that, God has a way of weeding out who we need for the season that we're going through. And that doesn't mean that individual you no longer love or care about. It's just that the season has passed and it's time for something else. And that's okay. And as someone who's a caregiver or someone who is going through the help syndrome where you're helping someone and on a constant basis and under current stress all the time, it's okay to be open to bring in new people to your life instead of sticking to the things that seem safe and true, but not necessarily are serving you well. Now, when people read your book, Surviving Compassion Fatigue, or and I also want to talk about your coaching services too real quick, but what is it that you want them to take away when reading the book? And also tell us a little bit about your coaching services and what you offer.
The main thing, there's a lot of things I want them to take away from that book. This book is powerful. It really helps you understand compassion fatigue. It really helps you understand the neuroscience of what's happening in your bodies, minds, and spirits with your service and caregiving for others, and why it's so imperative to take care of self. Mostly that you do have control if you agree with yourself to make some shifts and changes to do self-care consistently for you. That's largely what you get out of the book. Otherwise, like I said, we're existing and we're doing, and we could continue serving other people, ignoring ourselves, but that's to the detriment of selves. And so that book is really a powerful tool to help you decide for yourself to make some major changes to bring quality of life for you. I also had to recognize from that too, that I needed to, and I shouldn't say I needed to, I wanted to provide coaching for people they got so much out of the book, and then they said, as I'm going through life, I need to make major transitions and shifts in the way I do life. And that's hard for people to do. We kind of stick to patterns. And so I agreed to set up a coaching system and online, just like I'm looking at you on the Zoom system. Well, my coaching availability is available to people where we could just spend 45 minutes to an hour going through what's important to them, how they do life, so that I could help and support them making critical shifts to improve their lives, to regain some joy, to move from the existence, to figure out and design life where they create space for self.
Yes.
And joy and fun and laughter. In addition, in spite of the responsibilities on it, there's always a way of doing it, but when we're stuck in it, in what I call the struggle or the challenge, sometimes our thinking on how to do things different gets hijacked. And so having another perspective for somebody like myself or you to lend insight that there's a different way for you to consider doing this so that you could have a life for yourself in addition to doing others is important. So the coaching is available. It's just a matter of getting online.
You know, and actually, I don't come anywhere near doing what you do in terms of that kind of succinct. That's such a beautiful niche and so needed for women, I would say in general, but definitely women as we begin to age, because we begin to deal with maybe more and more loss, caregiving, certain kinds of trauma, life. So that's very helpful. Now, for those of you who want to find out more about Beverly's coaching services, please go to her website. For those of you who are listening on audio, her website is beverlykyer.com. For those of you who are actually going to the show page, you're listening from the show page, there's a link there to her site. There's also a link to her 2 books. And those of you who are listening on audio, you need to come to my show page too, because there's always kind of information that you need to see. So just go to Self-Discovery Radio TV Network and look for the Wellness Journey podcast series, or Google the Wellness Journey podcast series, and that'll put you in the Wellness Journey world, and you'll be able to come to this wonderful interview, and you'll see the links to Beverly's site and to her books, and also to her social media. Her Facebook and whatever other social media is all going to be there on our show page. Beverly, thank you so much for being
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor.
It's an honor to have you. And I have one more question for you. What is your definition of a seasoned woman who is well and thriving?
A seasoned woman, number one, is more than saying I love myself. It is really, really loving yourself. Consider yourself a woman who considers what she gives to others is a gift from above. And if you really look at it as a gift, your caring, your showing up, your attention, your patience, your determination, your loving acts of kindness, gifts are to be nurtured. They're to be cared for. They're to be pampered. They're to be protected. And so until you figure out that you love yourself so much that you'll do self-care for you, do it because you want to serve others until it becomes about you. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. And thank you to all of you listeners who tune in to listen to the Wellness Journey podcast series. I'm so grateful. Keep coming back. We have more for the Seasoned Woman's Guide to Renewing Her Essence. And we also have the other series, Living Your Life Like It's Golden. And we have like 2 or 3 other series. Just take a look at all the shows. They are wonderful, full of information and knowledge that gives you tips, tools, and techniques on how you can not just survive, but thrive along your wellness journey for your mind, body, and spirit. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you again next time. Join me next week as we dive into other ways on how to live in a way that is beneficial to your mind, body, and spirit. Till next time, keep that spice of life candle burning.
We hope that you enjoyed the show. To hear more of these wonderful shows on selfdiscoverymedia.com, just look up our podcast genre list. You will see many shows archives there ready for listening. Don't forget to share these wonderful shows. And if you wish to be a guest or a host, or you have an organization that needs to be highlighted, contact us at info@selfdiscoverymedia.com. Bye for now.